First Timothy chapter 6, verse 20. O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Bible Smack. Alright, today I am responding to Professor Dave. Professor Dave, got a question for you. When you talk about your video dealing with don't just call it a theory or something like that. Basically, you come out and you have a straw man. Why is it called a straw man? Because you had a definition of science which was very general, and then you want to deal with physical science. Science, meaning knowledge, could refer to all things, but is not measured by the scientific method. Scientific method deals with what we call physical science. It does not deal with metaphysical science. You cannot use the scientific method to deal with metaphysics. You cannot use the scientific method to deal with historical science. Why? Because when you have experiments, you do experiments in the present. You don't do experiments in the past. You can hope for history of experiments. Our technology, which was in the 1800s, does not go much past that. Then you have brute experiments. They go back to the 1600s. By the way, the scientific method was organized by Sir Francis Bacon, not Newton, not Galileo. Okay, it's a good thing to learn if you are a professor. Now, when we deal with hypothesis, a hypothesis is an educated guess. You should have an observation, and then you make up a hypothesis as an explanation. When you run through an experiment, and you have plenty of experiments, at some point you call it a theory. Problem, it is still ultimately a hypothesis. Why? Because an experiment can only debunk it. It cannot prove something to be true. It is still a guess. It is still an explanation which could be debunked later on by further experimentation. When we do experimentation, we try to remove the variables. But what about the variables that we do not know? You use an example, a metal ball and a feather. You drop them, but the wind would keep the feather up. But what about variables you do not know? You use a wooden ball and a metal ball, and there is a magnet, and it was the 1600s, and they didn't know that, supposedly. Basically, there are factors that we may not be aware of. This makes it subjective. Our most scientific investigations have subjectivity. You can go to a factory, and you can make a metal ruler exactly 12 inches. And you can stack up those 12-inch rulers. It is, at the time of my recording, 2:44 p.m., March the 5th, 2020. You can take that date, and you can measure off where the planet of Neptune is. Then you can take the rulers, and then you can calculate how many inches is the Earth from Neptune, correct? But wait. There are microscopic differences within each ruler, even if we cut it in a factory. As a result, these microscopic differences grow over billions and billions of times over. And once we reach those billions and billions, we would not know the exact inch. And so there is subjectivity in science. Our experience has vantage points. We experience things from our limited view and limited vantage point. This continues further down the road. Science is a more rationalized form of our subjective experience. Therefore, it is still objective. When we deal with these theories, we talk about explanatory power. God is the ultimate explanation for all things. Since he's the explanation for all things, he has explanatory power. Thus, people should be thinking theology when they think about science, according to you. You've not made a distinction, correct? Therefore, we should start from a theistic point of view. You have no evidence that God does not exist. We have experiences that God exists. We have reasons that God exists. See my video on the ontological argument. Now, when we look at what you had proposed, you had stated, well, we have the theories that are better than the laws because the theories are the explanations. But then they're subject to review by reason. And when you talk about gravity and you say, well, that's entrenched as true, then you say Big Bang, evolution, entrenched as true. Baloney. Why? Because you do not do experiments into the past. You do not have historical observation in the past that is being provided. The prehistory was never recorded. So you do not have an observation. When we look at it, these things can be debunked by science. It has to be falsifiable. Well, guess what? The Big Bang Theory is falsified. The first law of thermodynamics. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. Also, the law of gravity. You think about all the mass of the universe in a little dot the size of a pinhole. All the gravity would be inward energy. All that power would not expand the universe. The theory of the Big Bang relies upon an explosion from matter and antimatter. We do not have the antimatter. It has been falsified. We do not understand star formation. It breaks the scientific gas law, Boyle's law, because it is negative 300 degrees Celsius typically in space. Giant space clouds, when heated, would expand. They would not contract. You needed to have them contract at extreme levels to provide fusion. This is not possible. It is debunked. When you think of this transition from the Earth, or from the Big Bang to the Earth to evolution, the Earth cannot have subterranean waters buried too far deep into the soil. Yet, go to Russia. There is a super deep giant borehole. They call it the coal hole. That hole has water radiating at the bottom. Water 12 miles deep. Far too deep. If the Earth was a glob of super hot lava, all of the water would evaporate as it collected dust. Therefore, it should not have water. Genesis predicts that the earth was water. Therefore, score 1 for the Bible. Suck up. Evolution is this idea that all organisms are connected to one. How can they be connected to one? Why would we know that they're connected to one? Why not connected to a million? Because we have a thought form. We have a philosophy that starts off with abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is false. You cannot get life from non-life. It has been proven false over and over again. The statistics show an impossibility. Whether we talk about the statistical ability of having the chemicals in the right place for a cell to form, or the idea that all these chemicals were in the right place, then they formed 1 trillion parts in mechanical order. This is impossible. Thus, you are not dealing with science. You are not dealing with the scientific method, because those things in the past, you don't have an experiment to prove them. Thus, this is not science.